Dive down! The boy shielded the girl, unaware. Her dad was the Hells Angels. The marina smelled like sunscreen and fish and old rope. It was the kind of smell Ethan Parker had known his whole life, and on most summer afternoons he loved it. But today the air felt different. Heavy, like the sky was holding its breath. Ethan crouched on the dock and pulled a thick knot tight around a mooring cleat. The wooden planks creaked beneath him. Around him, the lake stretched out wide and blue, its surface still glittering despite the shadows creeping in from the west. "That's good work, son." Ethan looked up. Old Pete Calloway stood at the end of the dock, his arms crossed, his white beard catching the breeze. Pete had run the marina for 30 years. He didn't hand out compliments often. "Just doing my job," Ethan said. Pete walked closer and lowered himself onto an overturned bucket. He watched Ethan work for a moment before he spoke again. "You know, your mama used to walk this dock when she was young. Before the marina got built up, she'd come down here and just sit, watch the water." He paused. "Good woman, your mother." Ethan kept his hands moving on the rope. "Yeah," he said quietly. She was. "Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today." Now back to the story. She helped my sister once. Back when my sister was going through a real hard patch. Brought her groceries every week for 2 months. Never asked for a single thing in return. Pete shook his head slowly. People like that don't come around too often. Ethan didn't answer right away. He just nodded and moved to the next boat. He had heard stories like that his whole life. His mother had been gone for 8 years, and Cedar Falls still talked about her like she'd only just stepped out of the room. It used to make him sad. Now it mostly made him proud, even if the pride came wrapped in something that ached. He finished tying off a small fishing boat and stood up straight. That was when he noticed the sky. The clouds had been building for a while, but now they were something else entirely. They rolled in from the hills like a dark wall, thick and greenish-gray, swallowing the blue overhead in big, gulping bites. The temperature dropped fast. Ethan could feel it on his arms. "Pete." Ethan kept his eyes on the sky. "We need to move faster." Pete stood up and squinted westward. His expression shifted. "Lord have mercy." They moved quickly after that. Ethan jogged down the dock, checking each boat, tightening lines, calling out to the 2 other dock workers to do the same. Tourists who had been lounging on rental kayaks were already paddling hard toward shore. A family on the beach was grabbing towels and beach bags, the little kids squealing as the wind picked up and scattered their plastic toys across the sand. The first crack of thunder rolled over the hills like a warning. Then the rain came. Not slowly, all at once. A curtain of it, cold and hard, slamming into the lake and turning the surface into a chaos of white splashes. Lightning split the sky in the distance. 1, 2 seconds. Then the thunder again, closer this time. Ethan wiped rain from his eyes and scanned the dock. All the boats were tied. The tourists were clearing out fast. He started moving toward the shore when something caught his eye. Down past the marina, where the lake narrowed into the Cedar River, the banks were already flooding. Brown water churned and foamed, rising fast, swallowing the grassy edges of the riverbank whole. And standing right at the edge, too close, was a young woman. Her dark hair was plastered to her face by the rain. She was looking at her phone, maybe trying to find her way, maybe just distracted. Ethan opened his mouth to shout. Before the words left him, the bank gave way beneath her feet. She went down hard, slipping sideways into the river with a sharp cry that the wind nearly stole away completely. The current grabbed her instantly. It didn't hesitate. It pulled her out toward the middle and swept her downstream like she weighed nothing at all. Ethan was already running, and then he was diving. The river hit him like a wall, cold and fast and mean. It spun him sideways the moment he broke the surface, and for a half-second he couldn't tell which way was up. He kicked hard. His head came up. He sucked in air and looked around wildly. There, 10 feet ahead of him. The young woman was face down in the churning water, not moving. Ethan pulled hard with both arms, fighting the current that wanted to drag him sideways into a tangle of broken branches and foam. His boots felt like anchors. He should have kicked them off before jumping. Too late now. He pushed harder. A chunk of timber slammed into his left shoulder. The pain was sharp and immediate. He gritted his teeth and kept swimming. He reached her in seconds that felt like minutes. He grabbed her arm and rolled her over. Her face came up out of the water. Her eyes were closed. A gash on her forehead was bleeding freely, the red mixing into the brown water and disappearing. "Hey," he shook her. "Nothing." "Hey, stay with me." She didn't respond. He shifted his grip, looping his arm across her chest from behind, and turned them both to face downstream. That was the only way to survive a current this strong. You didn't fight it head on. You worked with it, angled toward the bank, and you waited for your moment. His mother had taught him that. She had grown up near this same river. Another piece of wreckage came spinning toward them. A whole section of wooden fence, posts and wire still attached, tumbling through the water. Ethan pulled the woman hard to the left. The fence scraped past his right side, the wire catching his arm and tearing a long, burning line across his forearm. He barely felt it. The current yanked them around a bend. The sound changed. Deeper. Louder. Rapids. Ethan could see the white water ahead where the river dropped over a shelf of rock, maybe 60 feet away, maybe less. His chest was burning. His legs were getting heavy. The cold was working into his muscles like something alive, trying to slow him down, trying to stop him. He angled hard toward the left bank, kicked with everything he had. His boots felt heavier with every stroke. People were gathering on the bank now. He could see them through the rain. Someone was running along the edge, keeping pace. He heard shouting but couldn't make out the words. 40 feet to the rapids. Maybe less. He angled harder. His fingers found nothing but water. Then his knee scraped something solid. A rock. He grabbed for it, missed. The current pulled him another few feet downstream. He tried again. This time his hand closed around a thick root jutting from the bank, half submerged, half above the waterline. He held on. The river pulled at him with both hands. His grip screamed. His arm shook. But he held. "Here!" He heard the voice from the bank. A man, older, wading in up to his waist with a rope tied around his middle. He threw the other end. It landed across Ethan's face. Ethan grabbed it. He looped it around the woman first, pulled it tight. He felt hands grabbing her, pulling her up and out. Her body cleared the water. She was on the bank. Then his grip on the root gave out. The current took him again. Fast. The rapids were close now. He could feel the roar in his chest. The rope snapped taut. It yanked him so hard he nearly lost it, but 3 sets of hands were pulling from the bank. He could see them straining. He kicked. He pulled. The water fought him for every single inch. And then the ground was beneath him. He rolled onto the wet grass and lay flat on his back. The rain hammered down on his face. His chest heaved. His arm was bleeding. His shoulder throbbed. Beside him, someone was already working on the young woman, tilting her head back, beginning compressions. "Ambulance is coming," a voice shouted. Ethan stared up at the dark sky and tried to remember how to breathe. The ceiling was white. That was the first thing Ethan noticed. White ceiling, white walls, and the soft beeping of a machine somewhere near his left ear. The smell hit him next. that sharp, clean hospital smell that reminded him of nothing good. He blinked, tried to sit up. His shoulder said no. He settled back against the pillow and looked around slowly. A narrow room. A window with the blinds half open. Outside, the sky was dark, and rain was still tapping against the glass in a quiet, steady rhythm. A bandage was wrapped around his right forearm. His shoulder was packed with something cold beneath his gown. A nurse appeared in the doorway before he could think of anything else. "Good. You're awake." She walked in with the calm, practiced ease of someone who had done this 10,000 times. She checked the monitor beside his bed, made a small note on her clipboard, and looked at him. "How do you feel?" "Like the River One," Ethan said. She smiled a little. "You've got a deep laceration on your forearm, 12 stitches, bruised shoulder, mild hypothermia." She set the clipboard down. "You're lucky, Mr. Parker." "The woman," he said. "The one in the water." "She's here. She's stable." The nurse adjusted the blanket at the foot of his bed. "She's going to be just fine." Something loosened in Ethan's chest. Something he hadn't even realized he was holding on to. He let out a long, slow breath and closed his eyes for a moment. She was okay. That was enough. That was everything. He lay there quietly for a while after the nurse left. The rain kept tapping at the window. His shoulder ached dully. He thought about the river, about the fence post and the wire, about the root in his hand, and the feeling of the current pulling at him like something that really, truly wanted him gone. He thought about his mother. She had loved this river, taken him fishing along its banks when he was small enough to sit on her shoulders. Told him it looked angry sometimes, but that it was never actually mean, just powerful, just doing what rivers do. He wasn't so sure about that tonight. A soft knock at the door pulled him back. "Come in," he said. The door opened slowly. A young woman stepped inside. She was dressed in a hospital gown with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, and there was a white bandage above her left eyebrow. Her dark hair was still slightly damp. She looked pale, a little shaky, but she was standing on her own 2 feet, and her eyes were open and bright. She was the woman from the river. She looked at him for a moment without speaking, like she wasn't entirely sure what to say, like whatever she had planned to say on the walk over had disappeared the moment she actually saw him. "You're the one who pulled me out," she said finally. "I helped," Ethan said. "Bunch of people on the bank did the hard part." She shook her head slowly. "That's not what they told me." She moved a little closer to the bed. Her voice was quiet but steady. "My name is Lily." "Ethan." She nodded like she already knew. Maybe someone had told her. She looked down at his bandaged arm, then back up at his face. "I don't really know how to say thank you for something like this," she said. Her voice caught just slightly on the last word. She pressed her lips together and looked at the window for a second before looking back at him. "So I'm just going to say it plain. Thank you, Ethan, for going in after me." "I'm glad you're okay," he said. And he meant it in a way that went beyond words. She stood there a moment longer. Then she pulled the blanket a little tighter around her shoulders and gave him a small, warm smile. "I'll let you rest," she said, "but I'm coming back tomorrow." She said it like a promise, simple and sure. "If that's all right?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "That's all right." The morning nurse came in just after 8 with discharge papers and a small paper cup of orange juice. Ethan signed where she pointed, pulled on the clean clothes someone had thought to bring from his apartment, and walked out into the hallway feeling stiff but grateful. The hospital was quiet that early. Just the soft squeaking of shoe soles on linoleum and the distant sound of a cart being wheeled somewhere down the hall. Morning light came through the tall windows at the end of the corridor in long, pale stripes. He was almost to the elevator when he heard his name. Ethan. He turned. Lily was standing near the waiting area just outside the elevator doors. She was dressed in her own clothes now. Jeans and a light green jacket. The bandage above her eyebrow was smaller than the night before, just a thin white strip. She had a canvas bag over one shoulder and a cautious little smile on her face. "They let you out?" she asked. "Just now," he said. "Me too." She held up the same discharge folder. "About an hour ago." He smiled. "You didn't have to wait." "I know," she said simply. They rode the elevator down together in comfortable silence. Outside, the air was cool and washed clean from the storm. The town looked rinsed. Puddles sat in the parking lot, reflecting the pale blue sky. Leaves and small branches were scattered across the sidewalks, left behind like evidence of what had happened the day before. They walked 2 blocks to a small diner called Patty's. It had been there forever, or at least as long as Ethan could remember. Red booths, a long counter with spinning stools, and a chalkboard menu above the kitchen window. It smelled like coffee and bacon and warm bread. They slid into a booth by the window. The waitress, a stout woman with silver hair named Donna, set 2 mugs of coffee in front of them before they even asked. She looked at Ethan with wide eyes. "Heard what you did yesterday," she said. "Your mama would have been real proud." Ethan wrapped both hands around the mug. "Thank you, Donna." She gave his shoulder a gentle pat and disappeared toward the kitchen. Lily was watching him when he looked back up. Not in a strange way, just quietly curious. "She knew your mom?" Lily asked. "Pretty much everyone here did," Ethan said. "She grew up in Cedar Falls. Lived here her whole life." He turned the mug slowly in his hands. "She passed about 4 years ago." "I'm sorry," Lily said. And it didn't sound like the automatic kind of sorry. It sounded like she meant it. "She was a good person," Ethan said. "Best one I knew." Lily nodded. She looked out the window for a moment at the wet street. A man was sweeping leaves off his front steps across the road. A dog trotted by on a leash, sniffing at every puddle. "I grew up around here too," Lily said. "Well, close by. I've been away for a few years." She paused. "It's a little strange being back." "Good strange or bad strange?" Ethan asked. She thought about that for a second. "Both, maybe." He understood that more than he could explain. They ordered eggs and toast and talked for over an hour. Lily laughed easily. She asked questions and actually listened to the answers. She told him small things about herself. She liked old bookstores and long drives and coffee that was too strong. She had studied environmental science for 2 years before taking a break. She wasn't sure what came next. Ethan talked more than he usually did around new people. Something about her made it easy. When they finally stepped back out onto the sidewalk and went their separate ways, Ethan walked home with his hands in his pockets and a quiet lightness in his chest that felt unfamiliar and good. That evening, his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was Lily. "Any chance you're free tomorrow? I know a good spot by the lake." Ethan read it twice. Then he smiled and typed back. "I know that lake pretty well. I'm in." The morning came in soft and golden. Ethan was already down by the lake when Lily arrived. The water was calm now, almost too calm, like it was embarrassed about what it had done 2 days before. Small ripples moved across the surface in slow, lazy circles. A pair of ducks drifted near the dock. The air smelled like pine and fresh mud and something sweet he could never quite name, but always associated with early summer mornings in Cedar Falls. Lily showed up right on time in a light gray hoodie and worn sneakers, her dark hair pulled back loosely. She had 2 coffees in a cardboard carrier and held one out toward him without a word. He took it. "You didn't have to do that." "You saved my life," she said. "The least I can do is bring coffee." He laughed a little, and they started walking. They followed the old path that curved along the eastern edge of the lake. Ethan knew every part of it. The crooked pine tree that leaned out over the water near the halfway point. The flat rock where kids liked to sit and fish on summer afternoons. The small wooden bridge near the inlet where the river fed into the lake. He had walked this path 100 times alone. It felt different now with someone beside him. He pointed out landmarks as they went. The spot where he had learned to swim as a kid. The place near the big willow where his mother used to read on Sunday afternoons, her shoes off and her feet in the cool grass. Lily listened to every word. She didn't rush him or change the subject. She just listened, and that meant more than she probably knew. "She sounds like she was really something," Lily said, after he described how his mother used to leave grocery bags on the doorsteps of neighbors who were struggling, always without leaving a note. "She was," Ethan said. "She never made a big deal of anything she did. She just did it." Lily nodded slowly. She looked out at the water. "I think that's the rarest kind of person, the ones who do good things when nobody's watching." They walked without talking for a while after that. Not an uncomfortable silence. The easy kind. Later they wandered into town and spent time poking around a small second-hand shop on Birch Street. Lily held up an old ceramic rooster and raised an eyebrow at the price tag. $3, she said. "Absolute steal." "For a rooster?" Ethan said. "A distinguished rooster," she corrected, setting it back very carefully. He laughed out loud. It surprised him a little. He didn't do that enough. She bought a paperback novel with a cracked spine, and he bought nothing. But he walked out smiling. They stopped at a little park near the center of town and sat on a bench while they finished their coffees. A group of kids were running through the splash pad nearby, shrieking with delight, completely soaked. An older couple walked a golden retriever on a long leash. A teenager sat in the grass nearby with headphones on, completely in his own world. Lily talked a little more about herself here. Small things, still. She didn't go deep. But she mentioned that being back in Cedar Falls felt complicated sometimes because people had certain ideas about her family. She didn't explain what she meant by that exactly. She just said it, and then looked down at her coffee cup. Ethan didn't push. He figured she would share things when she was ready. What he did say was, "People here are pretty decent, mostly. They try to see you for you." She looked at him sideways. "You really believe that?" "Yeah," he said. "I do." She seemed to sit with that for a moment. The afternoon stretched on easy and warm around them. By the time the sun had shifted low and golden over the rooftops, they were standing near Ethan's truck in the small lot behind the park. Lily tucked her book under her arm and looked at him. "There's a diner about 20 minutes outside town," she said. "Best grilled cheese you've ever had in your life. Tomorrow? Lunch?" Ethan grinned. "I'll drive." The diner sat at the end of a 2-lane road that cut through tall pines and open farmland. It was called Ruthie's. The sign out front was faded pink with one burned-out letter, so it read Arthes in the afternoon light. The parking lot was mostly gravel, and the building itself was small and square with big windows across the front that let in the sun. Ethan pulled in a few minutes before noon. He noticed right away that the lot was fuller than he expected for a Tuesday. A few pickup trucks, a minivan, Someone's old sedan with a cracked bumper. He parked near the edge and climbed out, stretching his arms above his head. His ribs were still a little sore from the river. He had stopped mentioning it because he didn't like making a fuss. He pushed open the glass door and stepped inside. The smell hit him first. Butter and coffee, and something sweet on the griddle. The inside of Ruthie's was exactly what it looked like from the outside. Small. Warm. A long counter with swivel stools ran along the left side. Booths lined the windows on the right. A chalkboard above the kitchen pass-through listed the specials in big, loopy letters. A ceiling fan turned slowly overhead. Ethan scanned the room for Lily. He didn't see her. He picked a booth near the window and settled in. A waitress with red hair and kind eyes came over almost immediately and filled his water glass without asking. He thanked her and picked up the laminated menu, even though he was pretty sure he already knew what he wanted. He checked his phone. No messages from Lily. He looked out the window at the gravel lot. The pines along the road swayed gently in the breeze. A hawk circled somewhere high above the tree line. Everything was still and calm and ordinary. Then he heard it. A low rumble. Distant at first, then closer, then very close. Motorcycles. Not one or two. A whole group of them. The sound filled the parking lot like rolling thunder. Ethan looked through the window and watched as one by one they pulled in. Big bikes, chrome catching the afternoon sun. The riders wore leather jackets and vests covered in patches. Hell's Angels. At least 8 of them, maybe more, moving in a tight group and parking in a line along the far edge of the lot, with the kind of practiced ease that said they had done it 1,000 times before. The diner went quiet, not all at once. It happened slowly, like air leaking out of a room. Conversations dropped to whispers. Whispers dropped to nothing. The waitress with the red hair stopped moving. A man 2 booths over put his fork down. Even the ceiling fan seemed to slow. Ethan sat very still. The bikers came through the door. One after another they filed in, big and broad and serious-looking. A few of them nodded at the room in general. Nobody nodded back. They moved toward the far end of the counter and the 2 large booths in the back corner. The room stayed quiet around them like a held breath. Then Lily walked through the door. Ethan blinked. She was dressed the same as always. Casual, her hair down. She looked completely at ease moving through the room, which surprised him because the room itself did not look at ease at all. Her eyes found him immediately, and she gave him a small wave. But she didn't come straight to him. Instead, she turned toward the largest of the men who had just come in. He was tall, wide across the shoulders. His dark hair was touched with gray at the sides, and his face was weathered in a way that spoke of years spent outdoors and in hard places. The vest he wore was covered in patches, and the one across his back read Hell's Angels in bold, stitched letters. He stood at the center of everything without seeming to try. Lily touched his arm. He looked down at her. Then she pointed toward Ethan's booth. Both of them walked over. Ethan stood up without quite deciding to. "Ethan," Lily said, "this is my dad, Rex Morgan." Rex extended his hand across the table. His grip was firm and steady. "I wanted to meet you," Rex said. His voice was low and even. "You saved my daughter's life." He held Ethan's eyes. "Thank you." The sun was low by the time Lily and Ethan found a bench near the lake. The water was calm now. Orange and pink light stretched across the surface in long, quiet ribbons. A few ducks moved near the reeds along the far bank. The evening felt easy and soft after the noise of the diner. Lily sat with her knees pulled close to her chest. She was looking out at the water. Ethan sat beside her. He didn't say anything right away. He had learned that Lily sometimes needed a little space before she could talk about something that mattered to her. So he waited. She spoke first. "I know what you're thinking," she said. "I'm not sure you do," Ethan said. She smiled a little. "You're wondering why I didn't just tell you." He looked at her. "Maybe." She was quiet for a moment. A duck paddled through the pink light on the water. Somewhere behind them, a screen door banged shut. "When people find out who my dad is," Lily said, "everything changes. The way they look at me. The way they talk to me. Sometimes they get nervous. Sometimes they try to be extra nice because they think it'll get them something." She shook her head slowly. "And sometimes they just disappear." Ethan nodded. He didn't rush in with words. "I got tired of it," she said. "I got tired of being Rex Morgan's daughter before I got to be Lily." She looked over at him. "I just wanted someone to know me first, before all of that." "That makes sense," Ethan said. She watched him carefully. "You're not upset?" "No," he said. And he meant it. She let out a long breath and leaned back against the bench. "He's a good man, Ethan. I know how that sounds. I know what people think when they see the patches and the bikes. But he raised me by himself after my mom left. He never missed a single school thing. Not one." She smiled at the memory. "He showed up to my 5th grade play in full leather. Every single mom in the front row scooted sideways." She laughed softly. "But he was there." Ethan smiled. "He seems like someone who keeps his word." "He does," Lily said. "That's the thing about him. He has this code. He lives by it. You do right by people. You protect what matters. You don't walk away when things get hard." She paused. "I've always admired that about him, even when it scared me a little." They sat together as the last of the sun slipped behind the tree line. The lake turned from orange to gray. Crickets started up somewhere in the grass. "I just didn't want you to run," Lily said quietly. "I'm still here," Ethan said. She looked at him. Something in her face relaxed, like a knot slowly coming loose. They walked back along the lake path as the streetlights flickered on one by one. The evening air carried the smell of pine and something faintly sweet from a nearby bakery that was just closing up. Ethan's ribs still ached when he breathed too deeply, but he didn't think about it much. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. A message from Sheriff Reeves. "Can you come by the station tonight? Got something you need to hear?" Ethan showed it to Lily. She read it and looked up at him. "Go," she said. "I'll be okay." The Cedar Falls Sheriff's Department was a modest building on the main road with a flagpole out front and a row of low shrubs along the walkway. Ethan pushed through the front door 20 minutes later. The deputy at the front desk waved him through without asking any questions. Sheriff Reeves was standing behind his desk with his reading glasses on and a folder open in front of him. He looked up when Ethan came in. His expression was careful. Serious. "Close the door," he said. Ethan did. Reeves took off his glasses and set them on the desk. He folded his hands and looked at Ethan directly. "The storm didn't do all the damage on its own," he said. "That old floodgate upstream. Someone got to it before the storm hit." He tapped the folder. "The damage was deliberate. Somebody did this on purpose." The morning came in gray and quiet. A thin mist sat over the lake, soft as smoke. Ethan drove to the sheriff's department with a cup of coffee going cold in the cup holder, and the weight of last night's conversation still sitting heavy in his chest. Someone had done this on purpose. He kept turning those words over in his mind, over and over like a stone in his hand. He pulled into the parking lot and sat for a moment. A robin was hopping along the curb near the flagpole. The flag hung still in the damp morning air. Everything looked ordinary, quiet, normal, but nothing felt that way anymore. Inside, Reeves had already set up a small table in the side room he used for interviews. 2 chairs, a notepad, a recorder sitting in the center of the table. He poured Ethan a fresh cup of coffee without asking, and set it down before taking his seat across from him. "I appreciate you coming back," Reeves said. He clicked the recorder on. "I just need you to walk me through that day, everything you remember. Start from the beginning." Ethan wrapped both hands around the warm mug. He thought back. "I was at the marina," he said, "helping tie down the rental boats. The storm came in fast, faster than the forecast said it would." Reeves was writing. "What time?" "Maybe 1:30, close to 2. Ethan paused. "Old Pete Calloway was there, and the Hendersons from the bait shop. We were all working to get things secured." "Did you notice anything unusual before the storm hit? Anyone near the river? Any vehicles or foot traffic upstream?" Ethan thought carefully. He closed his eyes for a second. He remembered the sound of the wind picking up, the smell of rain coming in strong and fast, the way the water had gone from calm to choppy almost instantly. "There was a truck," he said slowly. Reeves stopped writing and looked up. "It was parked on the gravel pull-off up near the old service road, the one that runs alongside the river above the marina." Ethan frowned. "I only noticed it because it seemed too early for a fishing truck. Nobody fishes that stretch much anyway. The water's too fast." "Can you describe it?" "Dark, maybe dark blue or black. A full-size pickup. Newer model, I think." Ethan shook his head. "I didn't look long. I was focused on the boats." "That's all right," Reeves said. "That's more than we had yesterday." He wrote for a moment. "Anyone in the truck? Could you see?" "I couldn't tell. The windows were tinted." Reeves nodded. He asked more questions. About the moment Ethan saw Lily, about the current and the debris and the direction the water was moving. He asked about the sound of the river, whether it had seemed unusually high before the rain had even fully started. Ethan thought about that one for a long time. "Yeah," he finally said. "Actually, yeah. The current was already strong when I hit the water. Stronger than a storm that size should have made it that quick." He looked at Reeves. "I remember thinking it felt wrong, but I wasn't thinking about reasons at the time." "Of course not," Reeves said. "You were busy saving someone's life." They talked for another 30 minutes. Reeves was thorough, but never pushy. He let Ethan think. Let him circle back to things. He asked him twice if there was anything else, any small detail that seemed unimportant, before finally clicking off the recorder. "You've been helpful," Reeves said. "I mean that." Ethan stood and pulled on his jacket. "Do you know who it was yet?" Reeves looked at him steadily. "Not yet. But we're getting there." He paused. "Don't go talking about this with too many people. Not yet." Ethan said he understood. He walked back through the front office and out into the cool morning air. The mist had thinned a little. The robin was gone. His truck sat alone near the far end of the parking lot. He was almost to the driver's door when he noticed the piece of paper tucked under his windshield wiper. He pulled it free and unfolded it. 3 lines. Block letters. Written by hand. "You don't know what you saw. Stop asking questions. Walk away while you still can." Ethan had not slept well. He lay in bed long after midnight, staring at the ceiling, listening to the creak outside his window. The note sat folded on his kitchen table. He had not thrown it away. He was not sure why. Maybe because throwing it away felt like pretending it did not exist. and pretending was something he had never been good at. By morning, he had made up his mind not to tell Lily. Not yet. She already carried enough worry about things she could not control. He did not want to add to that. He ate a piece of toast he did not taste and drove into town. Cedar Falls was starting to wake up the way it always did. The bakery on Maple Street had its lights on. The hardware store owner was sweeping the sidewalk out front. Two older women walked together near the park with coffee cups in their hands, talking quietly. A normal morning. A safe-looking morning. Ethan parked near the marina and started in on his work. There were boats to check after the storm, equipment to inventory, docks to inspect for damage. He moved through the tasks steadily, keeping his hands busy so his mind would stay quiet. He noticed the motorcycle around 9 o'clock. It was parked across the road from the marina entrance. A big machine, dark chrome and black paint, half in the shadow of an oak tree. Ethan glanced at it while carrying a coil of rope down to the dock. He did not think much of it at first, but an hour later, when he walked up to the supply shed to grab a box of hardware, the motorcycle was still there. He looked toward it more carefully this time. Rex Morgan sat on the bike with his arms crossed and his eyes forward. He was not looking at Ethan directly. He was just there, still as a fence post, patient in the way that only certain kinds of men are patient. Ethan went back to work. He spotted Rex again just before noon. Ethan had walked 3 blocks up to the diner to grab a sandwich to go. Rex was parked on the far side of the lot, engine off, watching the street, not making a show of it, not hiding either. Ethan carried his sandwich back to the marina and ate it sitting on a dock piling, watching the water. He was not scared exactly, but he was aware of everything. Late in the afternoon, Ethan carried a broken outboard motor to the small repair shop, 2 streets from the waterfront. He was coming back out through the side door when Rex stepped around the corner of the building. Not rushing, not sneaking, just there, the way a wall is just there. Rex was a big man, wide shoulders, thick arms, a salt and pepper beard trimmed close. He wore his leather vest with the patches on it, and his boots were heavy on the gravel. He looked like someone who had lived a long and complicated life and had made peace with most of it. "Walk with me a minute," Rex said. It was not a question, but it was not unkind either. They walked together down the narrow alley behind the shop, away from the street. Rex moved slowly, deliberately, with his hands at his sides. When they reached the end of the alley where it opened onto a quiet stretch of gravel beside the old storage yard, he stopped. He turned to face Ethan. "You talked to Reeves yesterday morning?" Rex said. Ethan nodded. "He asked me to." Rex looked at him for a long moment. His eyes were dark brown and steady. "The people who broke that floodgate," he said, keeping his voice low and even. "They are not small time. They've got money. They've got reach. And right now, they are nervous." He paused. "Nervous people do stupid things, dangerous things." He held Ethan's gaze. "You need to understand what you're standing in the middle of," Rex said, "because I don't think you fully do yet." The morning was cool and gray. Thin clouds stretched across the sky like worn fabric, and the air carried the smell of wet earth and pine. Ethan drove his truck along the old service road that followed the river upstream. Lily sat beside him, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes on the tree line. Sheriff Reeves followed in his patrol car, steady and close behind. Nobody talked much on the drive out. There was not a lot to say yet. The floodgate was about 2 miles north of town, tucked between a limestone ridge and a wall of old oak trees. Most people in Cedar Falls had never been out here. There was no reason to come unless you worked for the county water authority, and even then, Visits were rare. The gate was old infrastructure, functional but forgotten. The kind of thing people trust without thinking about. Ethan pulled off onto a gravel turnout and cut the engine. The three of them climbed out and stood for a moment, looking. The storm had torn through this area hard. Branches were down everywhere. Mud coated the rocks along the riverbank in a thick brown layer. The water had dropped since the flood, but it still moved fast, cold and dark, pushing through the narrow channel with quiet force. The floodgate itself was a large steel structure set into a concrete base. Heavy bolts, iron crossbars, a hand crank mechanism on the upper platform that had not been upgraded in decades. It was built to hold back serious water pressure, and it had done that job for years without complaint. Except now, parts of it were not where they were supposed to be. Sheriff Reeves crouched down near the base of the gate and pulled on a pair of latex gloves. He examined the concrete foundation carefully, moving his eyes slowly across every inch. Then he pointed. "Look at this," he said. Ethan and Lily leaned in. Along the lower left corner of the concrete base, the bolts that anchored the gate frame had been loosened. Not broken, not rusted through. Loosened. The threads were clean. Recent. "That does not happen by itself," Reeves said quietly. He stood and moved to the crank mechanism on the upper platform. Ethan followed him up the narrow iron steps. The metal was slick with moisture, and they climbed carefully. At the top, Reeves studied the release valve on the side of the crank housing. He did not touch it, but he leaned close. "The locking pin is gone," he said. "This valve controls the emergency release. Without the pin, all it takes is enough water pressure and the whole thing gives way." He straightened up. "Someone removed it." The word hung in the air. Lily stood at the base of the steps, looking up at them. Her face was pale. "So the flood," she said slowly. "It wasn't just the storm." "The storm made it worse," Reeves said. "But the storm didn't cause this." He looked across the river, then back at the gate. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. They knew this equipment. They knew what would happen when the water level rose. They spent another 30 minutes walking the area. Ethan found tire tracks in the mud near a narrow pull-off on the far side of the gate. Wide tires, something heavy. Reeves photographed everything. On the drive back into town, Reeves called his deputy and asked him to pull the county maintenance records for the floodgate. Service history, inspection logs, any documented visits from the past 6 months. They were still in the truck when his radio crackled. Reeves picked it up, listened, and said nothing for a moment. Then he pulled the patrol car over on the side of the road just ahead of Ethan's truck. Ethan stopped behind him and watched through the windshield as Reeves sat motionless inside his vehicle. When Reeves finally climbed out and walked back to Ethan's window, his expression was flat and careful. "The records are gone," he said. "All of them. Someone pulled every maintenance file for that floodgate from the county archive. Dating back 3 years. The next morning came in bright and warm. It felt strange, almost dishonest, for the sun to shine so cleanly after everything they had found at the floodgate the day before. But Cedar Falls did not seem to notice. Birds called from the tree line. Fishing boats drifted out across the lake. A couple of kids chased each other along the dock. Ethan noticed none of it. His mind was already working. Sheriff Reeves had put together a short list of former county workers who had maintained the floodgate over the years. Most of them were retired. A few had moved away, but 3 of them still lived within 20 minutes of town, and Reeves asked Ethan to ride along while he paid them a visit. The first man they spoke to was a retired water authority worker named Paul Gibbs. He lived on a small property off Route 9, surrounded by vegetable gardens and a barn that leaned slightly to the left. Paul was in his late 60s, wiry and sun-worn, with a habit of squinting before he answered any question. He remembered the floodgate well. "Worked that thing for 11 years, he said, leaning against his porch railing. "She was old but solid. You just had to know her. Know which bolts needed checking, which valves got stiff in cold weather." He paused and looked at Reeves. "You're telling me the locking pin was pulled?" "That's what we found," Reeves said. Paul shook his head slowly. "That pin doesn't come loose on its own. I don't care how old she is." He said it with the quiet certainty of a man who knew every inch of something he once cared for. Before they left, Ethan asked carefully if Paul had heard anything unusual lately. Any talk about the floodgate? Any strangers asking questions about the area? Paul squinted. "There was something," he said. "Few months back, maybe 5, 6 months. Fella came around asking about the upstream water rights, what the flood capacity was, how much pressure the old gate could hold." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Didn't think much of it at the time. Figured it was some engineer type." Reeves kept his voice easy. "You remember who sent him?" "Had a business card," Paul said. "Mercer something. Mercer Development, I think. Fancy logo on it." Ethan and Reeves exchanged a quick glance. They thanked Paul and moved on. The name came up again at the second stop. A former county supervisor named Helen Marsh lived in a small blue house near the edge of town. She was sharper than Paul, quicker to talk, and clearly had been wanting to say something to somebody for a while. She confirmed that a representative from a company called Mercer Development had submitted a formal inquiry to the county water office about the floodgate's load capacity. That inquiry had been filed and then quietly shelved. She did not know why. "Grant Mercer," she said, crossing her arms. "That man has been trying to get his hands on the lakefront properties for 2 years. Every time someone has a hard season, his people show up with an offer." She looked at Reeves steadily. "You think about who benefits if people get scared enough to sell." Nobody answered her. They didn't need to. By early evening, Ethan's head was full of names and questions and pieces that were starting to fit together in a way that made his stomach uneasy. Lily met him at the small picnic tables near the south end of the lake. She had brought food from the diner in a paper bag. Sandwiches, chips, 2 bottles of lemonade. Simple and easy. The kind of meal that doesn't ask anything of you. They sat across from each other as the sun dropped lower over the water. The lake turned gold and then deep orange. A light breeze came off the surface, cool and clean. Lily watched him carefully. "You okay?" she asked. "Getting there," he said. She handed him a sandwich, and their fingers brushed for just a moment. Neither of them moved away quickly. They ate in comfortable quiet for a while. The easy kind of quiet that only happens between 2 people who are starting to feel genuinely safe with each other. "I like this," Lily said softly, looking out at the water. Ethan looked at her. "Me too," he said. And he meant more than the dinner. The morning came quietly. Ethan was still drinking his first cup of coffee when his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was Sheriff Reeves. "Come by the office when you get a chance," Reeves said. "I've got something I want to show you." Ethan set his mug down. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. The sheriff's office sat on the main street of Cedar Falls, sandwiched between a hardware store and a small insurance agency. It was a modest building. Brick walls, a wooden front door, a flag out front that caught the morning breeze. Ethan had been inside a few times over the years. It always smelled faintly of old coffee and printer paper. Reeves was already at his desk when Ethan arrived. A spread of documents covered nearly every inch of the surface. Printed pages, handwritten notes, a county map with several locations circled in red marker. The sheriff looked like he hadn't slept much. The lines around his eyes were deeper than usual. "Sit down," Reeves said, gesturing toward the chair across from him. Ethan sat. Reeves leaned back and folded his hands together. "Grant Mercer," he said. The name came out steady and deliberate, the way Reeves said things when he had been thinking about them for a long time. Ethan nodded. "Helen Marsh mentioned him yesterday. Paul Gibbs, too." "I know," Reeves said. "And when the same name comes up twice in one afternoon without you even going looking for it, that means something." He slid a folder across the desk toward Ethan. "Take a look." Ethan opened it carefully. Inside was a collection of public business records, property purchase proposals, development applications, a timeline Reeves had put together by hand, written in his careful, even handwriting. Ethan read slowly, going line by line. Over the past 2 years, Grant Mercer's development company had made repeated offers to buy lakefront properties in and around Cedar Falls. Most of the offers had been rejected. The prices Mercer offered were below what the land was worth, sometimes significantly. A few desperate sellers had accepted, but the majority of property owners had held on. Then, about 6 months before the storm, the offers had stopped. Ethan looked up. "He stopped making offers," he said. Reeves pointed at him. "Right. And then 5 months later, someone starts asking detailed questions about the floodgate's capacity." He paused. "And then the storm hits, and the floodgate gives way a lot easier than it should have." Ethan stared at the papers in his lap. The shape of it was becoming clear. If property owners were suddenly facing flood damage, fear, and expensive repairs, they might be a lot more willing to sell. Quickly. At whatever price someone offered them. "He needed people to be scared," Ethan said quietly. "That's my thinking," Reeves said. He rubbed the side of his jaw. "Now, thinking it and proving it are two very different things. Mercer is careful. He's got lawyers and he's got money and he's got people who do things for him without leaving a clear line back to his front door." He picked up his coffee cup, then set it back down without drinking from it. "But we're building something. Slowly." Ethan nodded. He thought about Lily in the water. He thought about the current pulling her under. He thought about the fact that someone might have planned all of it, not caring who got hurt, not caring who drowned, as long as the property values dropped far enough. Something hard settled in his chest. "What do you need from me?" he asked. Reeves looked at him for a long moment. "Right now, I need you to be careful. Go about your days normally. Don't tip anyone off that we've connected these dots." He met Ethan's eyes. "And if you notice anything unusual, you call me. Day or night." The rest of the day passed without incident. Ethan worked his afternoon shift at the marina, helped an older couple load fishing gear onto a rental boat, and shared a brief phone call with Lily around dinner time. Normal things. Ordinary things. He drove home late, taking the long road that curved around the south end of the lake. It was dark and quiet. The kind of dark that only existed out here away from the main streets. His headlights swept across the tree line as he rounded each bend. He almost didn't notice it at first. A vehicle. Black or dark blue, sitting far back in his rearview mirror. No distinguishing features. Just a pair of headlights holding the same distance behind him, turn after turn, for nearly 2 miles. Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He turned left. The headlights turned left. He turned right. The headlights turned right. He kept his eyes on the mirror, and his breathing steady until he reached his driveway. He pulled in and cut his engine. When he looked back at the road, The vehicle had stopped just beyond the reach of his porch light. It sat there for a long moment, idling. Then it drove away slowly into the dark. Ethan didn't sleep well. He lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, listening to the night sounds outside his window. Crickets, the distant lap of the lake against the shore, the occasional sweep of a car passing on the main road. Normal sounds, safe sounds. But his mind kept drifting back to those headlights in his rearview mirror, sitting still at the edge of the dark, like something waiting. By morning, he was up before sunrise. He made coffee and stood at the kitchen window watching the sky turn from gray to pale orange over the water. Cedar Falls looked peaceful from here. Quiet rooftops, mist on the lake, a few birds cutting across the early light. It was hard to imagine anything dangerous hiding inside something that looked so calm. He drank his coffee slowly and tried to think about something else. He had been meaning to sort through the back bedroom for months. It was the room he never quite knew what to do with. After his mother passed, he had moved her belongings carefully into boxes and stacked them along the far wall. He hadn't been able to throw anything away. He hadn't quite been able to go through it all either. So the boxes had just sat there, sealed and patient, waiting for a day when he felt ready. He wasn't sure he was ready today, but he needed something to do with his hands, something quiet and real. He brought a second cup of coffee into the back room and started with the nearest box. Most of it was ordinary. A few folded sweaters that still held the faint shape of her, a small collection of ceramic birds she used to keep on the windowsill, a coffee mug with a chip in the handle that she had refused to throw away because she said chipped things had more character than perfect things. He set each item down carefully, like they were fragile in ways that had nothing to do with the material they were made from. The third box took him longer to open. It was heavier than the others. When he folded back the cardboard flaps, he found books. Some were novels she had loved. A few were old cookbooks with her handwriting in the margins, little notes to herself about what to add or what to change next time. He smiled at those without meaning to. And then, near the bottom of the box, wrapped loosely in a faded dish towel, he found them. Journals, 4 of them. Small, plain notebooks with soft covers, the kind you could buy at any drugstore. He picked up the first one and turned it over in his hands. Her name was written inside the front cover in her careful, looping handwriting. He sat down on the floor right there beside the box. He opened the first journal slowly. The way you open something you understand is going to matter. The earliest entries were from years before he was born. Small observations, mostly. Things she noticed about people. Things that moved her. A neighbor who left groceries on a widow's porch without being asked. A stranger who sat with a lost child in a parking lot until the parents arrived. She wrote about these things the way some people wrote about beautiful scenery, like they were worth stopping for, worth recording. He read for a long time. He moved through the journals slowly, page by page, watching his mother's handwriting change slightly over the years, but never losing its warmth. She wrote about kindness the way other people wrote about faith, with complete certainty, with no need to argue for it. Near the middle of the third journal, a single line stopped him cold. He read it once, then again, then a third time. She had written it simply, without fanfare, as if she were just putting down something she already knew to be true. When you save one person, you save the generations that come after them. Every life is a river. It just keeps going. Ethan sat with those words for a long time. The room was quiet around him. Outside, Cedar Falls was waking up. But in here, in this small room full of her things, something was settling inside his chest. something warm and steady. He didn't mean to fall asleep sitting there on the floor with the journal open in his lap. But he did, and for the first time in days, his sleep was peaceful. Ethan almost didn't go. The note had been tucked under his windshield wiper some time before noon, short and plain, written in heavy block letters on a folded piece of paper. Meet me at the old fishing dock, south end of the lake, 3 p.m. Come alone. Rex. Ethan had read it twice, standing in his driveway with the sun high overhead. His first instinct was to call Lily. His second was to call Sheriff Reeves. His third was to just ignore it entirely and stay home. But something stopped him from doing any of those things. He thought about the way Rex had shaken his hand at the diner. No performance in it, no angle. Just a man saying thank you and meaning it all the way down. He thought about the quiet way Rex had been watching over him these past days. Not crowding him, not threatening, just present, like a shadow that meant no harm. He folded the note and put it in his pocket. At 5 minutes to 3, he pulled his truck onto the gravel lot at the south end of Cedar Lake and sat there for a moment looking out through the windshield. The water was calm today. The kind of flat, silver calm that only showed up in the afternoons when the wind took a rest. A row of old wooden fishing docks stretched out from the bank, their planks gray and worn smooth by years of weather and boots. Rex was already there. He was standing at the end of the longest dock with his back to the lot, hands in his jacket pockets, looking out at the water. His motorcycle was parked at the edge of the gravel. No one else around. Ethan got out of the truck and walked toward him. His boots made a hollow sound on the dock planks. Rex didn't turn around right away. He just waited until Ethan was standing beside him, and then he looked over with a nod. "Thanks for coming," Rex said. "Sure," Ethan said. They stood quietly for a moment. The water made small sounds against the dock posts below them. Somewhere out on the lake, a bird called once and then went silent. Rex reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph. He held it out without saying anything. Ethan took it carefully. It was old. Worn at the edges, the color faded the way photos got when they had been handled many times over many years. It showed a stretch of rural highway, trees on both sides, and at the edge of the road, a woman crouched beside a man lying on the asphalt near a wrecked motorcycle. The woman's back was mostly to the camera, but her hair, her posture, the way she was bent close to the man with one hand resting gently on his arm, like she was steadying him. Ethan's chest went tight. He knew that posture. He knew that hair. "That's my mother," he said. His voice came out quieter than he expected. Rex nodded slowly. "Yes, it is." Ethan looked up from the photograph. Rex was quiet for a moment. His jaw moved slightly, like he was choosing his words carefully and checking them before he let them out. 22 years ago, Rex said, "I went down hard on a highway about 40 miles east of here. Came around a wet curve too fast. Bike went out from under me." He paused. "I was in bad shape. Remote stretch of road. A few cars passed. Nobody stopped." He looked back out at the water. "Your mother stopped. She pulled over, got out, and she stayed with me. Kept me talking. Kept me from going under until the ambulance got there." He let out a slow breath. "The paramedics told me later that if I'd been alone another 15 minutes, I wouldn't have made it." He was quiet for a beat. "I spent years trying to find her," Rex said. "Years." His voice dropped lower. "By the time I tracked down her name, her town, her family..." He stopped. He looked at Ethan. She was already gone. The morning came in soft and gold through Ethan's kitchen window. He sat at the small table with both hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, watching the light move across the floor. He hadn't slept much. Not because he was afraid or restless, but because his mind had been too full for sleep. Too full of Rex's voice. Too full of that old photograph and what it meant. His mother had saved Rex Morgan's life. And then Ethan had saved Rex Morgan's daughter. He turned that over slowly, the way you turn something fragile in your hands to look at every side of it. He was still sitting there when his phone buzzed on the table. "Good morning. You okay? You went quiet last night." "Lily." He smiled a little and typed back. "Can I come by? I want to tell you something." Her reply came fast. "I'll put the coffee on." Lily's apartment was on the second floor of a narrow building 2 blocks from the waterfront. She met him at the door, still in her sweatshirt, her hair pulled back loosely, looking comfortable and warm the way she always did first thing in the morning. She handed him a mug, without asking if he wanted one. They sat together on her small couch, and Ethan told her everything. He told her about the note on his windshield, about the drive to the South Dock, about standing next to her father on those old gray planks and looking at a photograph he would never forget. Lily listened without interrupting. Her expression shifted as he talked. Something in her face went very still and very soft at the same time. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "He never told me that," she said. Her voice was low. "About your mother? About the crash?" She looked down at her mug. "He never told me." "He carried it a long time," Ethan said. Lily looked up at him. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't let the tears fall. "He's not an easy man to know," she said quietly. "Most people never try." She paused. "But he's always been there. Every single time." Ethan nodded. He thought about all the moments over the past 2 weeks when Rex had appeared without making a scene. Across the street, near the marina, at the edge of a parking lot, always at a distance, always watching. And somehow Ethan had gone from feeling unsettled by it to feeling something closer, to grateful. "I think I've been seeing him wrong," Ethan said. Lily reached over and put her hand on his arm. Just for a second. But it was enough. That afternoon, Rex sent a short message asking if Ethan wanted a ride to the Cedar Falls Community Rebuilding Fund event at the town park. It was a charity gathering that had been organized in response to the flood damage. Local businesses had donated food and supplies. Families were bringing things to share. Ethan said yes. Rex picked him up on the motorcycle, which Ethan had not actually expected. He climbed on with slightly less confidence than he would have liked, and Rex pulled out onto the road without comment. The park was already busy when they arrived. Tables were set up under tall trees. Kids were running through the grass. Volunteers moved between groups carrying boxes and coolers and folding chairs. What Ethan did not expect was what happened when Rex walked in. An older man near the food table spotted Rex first and crossed the grass with his hand already out. "Rex, good to see you, man." Rex shook his hand firmly and clapped him on the shoulder. Then a woman with a young daughter stopped him near the drinks table. She said something quietly, and Rex leaned down and listened. He nodded. He reached into his jacket, wrote something on a card, and handed it to her. She thanked him with genuine relief in her eyes. Ethan stood a few steps back and watched. This was not the man Cedar Falls whispered about in nervous tones. This was someone people actually trusted. The morning after the charity event, Sheriff Reeves called Ethan before 8. "I need you to come by the office," Reeves said. His voice had that careful, steady quality it got when something important was happening. Not urgent, not panicked, just focused. "We've got something new." Ethan was there within 20 minutes. The sheriff's office was a modest building on the main street of Cedar Falls. 2 desks, a row of metal filing cabinets, a bulletin board covered in notes and photographs. Reeves was standing at a folding table near the window when Ethan walked in. He had papers spread out in front of him. "Sit down," Reeves said. Ethan sat. Reeves picked up a stapled stack of papers and set it down closer to Ethan. "Contractor records," he said, "filed with the county for infrastructure work done on the upstream water system. 3 separate jobs over the past 2 years." He tapped the top page. All 3 hired through the same project management company. Ethan looked at the name printed at the top of the form. Mercer Development Group. His stomach tightened. "Mercer had contractors working up near the floodgate," Ethan said. "Officially, the jobs were listed as routine drainage improvements." Reeves crossed his arms. "Drainage improvements that were approved quickly, with very little review, by a county board that Mercer has donated to generously for the past several years." Ethan leaned back in his chair. He looked at the papers again. The dates, the approvals, the signatures, everything neat and official looking on the surface. But underneath it all, something felt deeply wrong. "Do the contractors know what they were actually helping with?" Ethan asked. "That's what I'm trying to figure out." Reeves pulled out a second folder. Inside were printed employee records, names, job titles, dates of employment. He pointed to one name near the middle of the page. This man worked for one of the contracting companies that had access to the floodgate system. He was on site twice in the 6 weeks before the storm. Reeves paused. "He quit 3 weeks before the flood. No notice, no explanation." Ethan stared at the name. "Have you talked to him?" "I tried," Reeves said. "He wouldn't answer my calls. Wouldn't come to the door when I went by his house." The sheriff's jaw was tight. "But this morning I got a message. Anonymous, short. It said he wants to talk, but not at the station and not anywhere public." Ethan looked up. "He's scared," Ethan said. "Terrified," Reeves agreed. "And that tells me he knows something real." They met him that afternoon, at a small house out past the edge of town, tucked behind a gravel driveway and a row of overgrown hedges. The man who answered the door was in his mid-50s, heavy-set, with a short gray beard and dark circles under his eyes that suggested he had not been sleeping well for quite some time. His name was Carl Briggs. He let them inside without a word, and closed the door quickly behind them. The curtains were already drawn. Carl stood in the middle of his living room, with his arms crossed over his chest, his eyes moving between Ethan and the sheriff like he was still deciding whether this had been a mistake. "Nobody followed you?" he asked. "No," Reeves said calmly. Carl exhaled slowly. He sat down on the edge of his couch and rubbed his face with both hands. "I knew something was wrong," he said. "Weeks before the storm, the work they had us doing up near that gate." He shook his head. "It wasn't drainage work. I've done drainage work my whole career. What they were asking us to do was different. We were weakening things, not fixing them." Reeves leaned forward slightly. "Did anyone tell you why?" "Nobody tells you anything directly." Carl's voice was bitter. "But I heard enough. Mercer's name came up more than once." He looked at the floor. "When I quit, one of the supervisors told me to keep my mouth shut. He didn't say it like a suggestion." A long silence settled over the room. Then Carl looked up at Sheriff Reeves. "I'll testify," he said quietly. "Whatever you need. I'll testify." Carl Briggs arrived at the sheriff's office the next morning at 9 sharp. He was dressed simply, dark pants, a plain blue shirt. He carried a worn leather folder tucked under one arm, and he held it close to his chest like it was something precious, something he had been protecting for a long time. Sheriff Reeves sat across the desk from him. Ethan sat off to the side, quiet, listening. Lily had stayed home at her father's request. Rex had told her, simply and firmly, that some conversations were better kept small. Carl opened the folder on the desk. Inside were photographs, handwritten notes, copies of work orders he had kept when he quit. "I wasn't sure why I saved all of it," Carl said, smoothing one of the pages flat with his palm. "I just had a feeling that someday it would matter." Reeves studied the documents carefully. His face stayed calm, but Ethan could see the sheriff's eyes moving quickly across the pages, taking everything in. The work orders were detailed. They listed specific components of the floodgate system. They listed tasks that had nothing to do with drainage improvement. Carl had quietly written his own notes in the margins at the time. Small observations, dates, names of supervisors who had given verbal instructions that contradicted the official paperwork. "This one," Carl said, pointing to a single page near the bottom of the stack. "This is the one that made me walk off the job." Reeves picked it up. It was a handwritten instruction, initialed but not fully signed, directing Carl's crew to weaken a specific tension bolt assembly on the gate's pressure relief mechanism. The note described it as a calibration adjustment. Carl tapped the page. "That's not a calibration adjustment. I've worked on water infrastructure for 30 years. That instruction was designed to make the gate fail under heavy water pressure." He looked at Reeves directly. "Under exactly the kind of pressure a major storm would create." The room was very quiet. Ethan felt something cold move through him, because it meant the flood had not been a matter of someone taking a shortcut or cutting corners to save money. It had been calculated, step by step, planned out like a blueprint. Reeves set the page down gently. "Are you willing to have these documents formally entered into evidence?" "Yes," Carl said. "And you're prepared to testify under oath to everything you've told me today?" Carl folded his hands on the table. His jaw was set. He looked like a man who had been carrying something heavy for a very long time, and had finally decided to put it down. "I am," he said. That evening, Cedar Falls held its community recovery gathering on the wide, grassy lawn beside the lake. It had been planned for weeks, a celebration of the town's rebuilding efforts. Local volunteers had strung lights between the old oak trees that lined the waterfront. Folding tables were covered with potluck dishes. A small band played from a wooden stage near the water's edge, soft and warm, the kind of music that made you feel like everything might be all right. Children ran between the tables. Old couples sat in lawn chairs. Neighbors who had barely spoken in years stood together laughing over paper plates of food. Ethan stood near the water's edge and looked out at it all. The lake was calm tonight, still and dark and glittering with the reflection of the string lights overhead. After everything, after the flood and the threats and the fear that had settled over this town like a second storm, after all of it, here they were, together, choosing to celebrate anyway. Lily appeared beside him and slipped her hand into his. He looked at her. She was smiling at the crowd with something soft and full in her eyes. "This is what my dad always says people underestimate," she said quietly. "He says the thing that scares powerful people most is when regular folks decide they're not afraid anymore." Ethan looked back at the lake. The lights shimmered on the water, and for the first time in a long time, he believed that was true. The gathering began winding down slowly, the way good things always do. Not all at once, but gently, people drifting toward their cars, calling out goodbyes, carrying empty dishes back to their trucks. The band played one last song, something quiet and easy, and then the music stopped. Ethan and Lily stayed. They walked together along the waterfront path that curved around the edge of the lake. The string lights behind them grew smaller with each step. Ahead, The path stretched out into soft darkness, lit only by the moon and the faint shimmer of the water beside them. The night air was warm and still. It smelled like lake water and cut grass and somewhere distant. Someone's campfire. Lily walked close to him. Their arms touched as they moved. Neither of them said anything for a while, and the silence between them was comfortable. The easy kind. The kind that doesn't need to be filled. Ethan listened to the sound of the water lapping gently against the bank. He thought about Carl sitting across from Sheriff Reeves that morning. The worn leather folder. The 30 years of experience in that man's hands, and the courage it took to finally use it. He thought about the lights strung between the oak trees and the neighbors laughing together, and the children running barefoot across the grass. He thought about his mother. She had loved this town. She had walked this same waterfront path 100 times. She had known these people, helped these people, and quietly believed in them even when things were hard. He understood now, in a way he hadn't before, that the life she had lived was still here, still moving through everything, through Rex, through Lily, through him. "You went quiet," Lily said softly. "I was just thinking," Ethan said. "Good thoughts?" He considered it honestly. "Yeah, really good ones." She smiled and looked out at the water. They stopped near the old wooden dock at the far end of the path. The boards were worn smooth from years of footsteps. The lake stretched out endlessly in front of them, dark and wide and peaceful under the open sky. Lily sat down at the edge of the dock. She let her feet hang above the water. Ethan sat beside her. For a moment they just looked out at the lake together. Then Lily said, "I was scared tonight, at the gathering." She paused. "Not of anything specific, just scared that it might not last, that things might fall apart again before we get a real chance." Ethan looked at her. Her face was turned toward the water. The moonlight caught the edge of her cheek. "I know that feeling," he said. She turned to look at him then. Her eyes were steady and open and honest in a way that made his chest ache a little. "I don't want to be scared of it anymore," she said. "Of good things. Of letting them matter." Ethan held her gaze. He thought about all the times since his mother died when he had kept the door to his heart mostly closed. Not on purpose exactly, more like a habit of protecting something that had already been broken once. It was easier not to hope too much, easier not to reach too far. But sitting here beside her, with the lake quiet and the town glowing faintly in the distance, that old caution felt small. It felt like something he was ready to set down. "I love you, Lily," he said. The words came out simply. Not rehearsed, not dramatic, just true. She looked at him for a moment, and her eyes went soft. "I love you too," she said. "I think I have for a while now." He reached over and took her hand. She laced her fingers through his and held on. "I want to build something," Ethan said quietly. "With you. Here, in this town. A real life." Lily leaned her head gently against his shoulder. "Me too," she said. The lake lay still before them. The moon hung high and steady overhead, and the two of them sat there together, holding on, looking out at the water and everything it promised. The morning came bright and clear over Cedar Falls. Birds moved through the trees along the waterfront. The lake was flat and calm. A few early fishermen had their lines out already, their small boats drifting quietly near the far shore. Grant Mercer sat at the desk in his home office, with his phone pressed against his ear. The curtains were drawn. The room was dim. On the desk in front of him sat a half-empty mug of coffee, long gone cold. "How much does Reeves have?" he said. The voice on the other end spoke quickly. Mercer listened without moving. His jaw tightened. He set the phone down on the desk without saying goodbye. He sat very still for a moment, staring at nothing. Then he picked up the mug and set it down again on the other side of the desk. A small, restless movement. The kind a person makes when their mind is working fast and their body doesn't know what to do with itself. He stood up and walked to the window. He pulled the curtain back just slightly and looked out at the street below. A neighbor was walking a dog. A woman was loading groceries into her car. Everything outside looked completely ordinary. Mercer let the curtain fall back. He had spent 20 years building his reputation in this town. Careful years. Patient years. He had donated to school fundraisers and shown up at ribbon cuttings and shaken every hand offered to him. He had smiled at people he didn't care about and listened to problems he had no interest in solving. He had done all of it deliberately, the way a man builds a wall, one brick at a time, until the thing behind it is completely hidden. And now some retired gate worker with a leather folder was going to tear it all down. Mercer moved back to his desk. He opened the bottom drawer and took out a separate phone, a prepaid one. He turned it over in his hand once, then began typing a message. He chose his words carefully. He always chose his words carefully. He sent the message and placed the phone face down on the desk. Then he poured the cold coffee into the small sink behind his office bar and rinsed the mug out slowly. He dried it with a hand towel and set it back on the shelf. He straightened his collar in the mirror on the wall. He looked at himself for a moment. Calm, composed, controlled. He picked up his regular phone and dialed his assistant. "Clear my afternoon," he said when she answered, "and call Halverson at the county office. Tell him I want to meet for lunch." He hung up. There was still time. There was always still time if you moved fast enough and thought clearly enough and didn't let fear make your decisions for you. Mercer had survived worse than this. He had survived audits and lawsuits and a business partner who had tried to take everything from him back in 2009. He had come out the other side of all of it standing. He would come out the other side of this, too. He sat back down at his desk and opened his laptop. He began to work. Sheriff Reeves was at the station by 7 that morning. He had 3 folders open on his desk and a legal pad covered in handwritten notes. He had barely slept. He picked up his phone and called Carl's number. It rang 4 times. No answer. He set the phone down and looked at the folders. Then he picked up the phone and called again. 4 rings, then voicemail. Carl's recorded voice, steady and plain. "Leave a message." Reeves set the phone down a second time. He waited 10 minutes and called again. Nothing. He stood up slowly from his chair. He walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. His deputy's cruiser was parked near the entrance. The morning was still bright and quiet outside. Reeves reached for his jacket and his keys. Something in his gut had already told him what his phone calls were beginning to confirm. Carl was gone. The drive home from the marina took about 20 minutes on a good day. Ethan took the long road back, the one that curved around the east side of the lake before cutting inland through a stretch of tall pines. He liked that road. It was quiet out there. No traffic lights, no storefronts, just trees and gravel, and the occasional deer standing at the edge of the woods watching him pass. He had the window down. The evening air smelled like pine needles and something cool coming off the water. After a full day of hauling gear and scrubbing down boat hulls in the sun, the breeze felt good on his face. He wasn't thinking about Mercer. He was thinking about Lily, about what she had said to him the night before, standing at the water's edge with the lights from the celebration behind her. About the way her voice had sounded when she said she loved him. He was smiling a little without realizing it. The road curved left through a dense patch of pines. The trees pressed close on both sides here. The last of the evening light barely reached the ground through the branches. Ethan slowed down a little out of habit. The gravel was loose in this section and his tires had slipped on it before. He saw the truck too late. It was parked sideways across the road, a big dark pickup with no headlights on, just sitting there in the middle of the lane like it had broken down. Ethan hit the brakes. His truck slid on the loose gravel and stopped about 30 feet short of the other vehicle. He sat there for a second, engine running, both hands on the wheel. He squinted through the windshield. He couldn't see anyone in the parked truck. No hazard lights, no one standing outside waving for help. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He shifted into reverse. Before he could lift his foot off the brake, headlights flooded his mirrors. A second vehicle had pulled in directly behind him, blocking the road. He was boxed in. Ethan's heart started hammering. He looked left. Trees. He looked right. Trees and a steep drainage ditch running along the shoulder. The doors of the truck in front of him opened. 2 men climbed out. Big men, both wearing dark clothes. They walked toward him without hurrying. Ethan didn't wait. He cranked the wheel hard to the right and pressed the gas. His truck lurched off the gravel and down into the drainage ditch with a bone-rattling thud. The front end dipped, and he felt the undercarriage scrape hard against the concrete culvert at the bottom. He floored it. The tires spun and grabbed, and the truck clawed its way up the other side of the ditch and bounced back onto a narrow dirt path that ran along the tree line. Behind him he heard shouting. He didn't look back. He kept driving. The dirt path was rough and narrow, and branches slapped against his windshield. His headlights jumped wildly over the uneven ground. He gripped the steering wheel as hard as he could and kept the truck moving forward. Then something hit the back window. It cracked in a spiderweb pattern across the glass, but didn't shatter all the way through. Ethan ducked instinctively and pressed himself lower in the seat. He kept driving. The path bent sharply and then opened up onto a 2-lane road. Ethan swung out onto the pavement and accelerated hard. His hands were shaking. His right side ached where he had slammed against the door during the ditch crossing. When he pressed his arm against his ribs, he winced. Something was wrong there. He wasn't sure how wrong yet. He grabbed his phone off the passenger seat and called the first person he thought of. Rex answered on the second ring. "They came for me," Ethan said. His voice was steadier than he felt. "On the East Road. 2 trucks. I got out, but—" He stopped and pressed his arm against his side again. "I'm hurt." There was a pause on the other end. "Where are you right now?" Rex said. The sun came through the curtains and landed across Ethan's face, but he didn't move. He was awake. He had been awake for a while. He just didn't see much reason to get up. His ribs were wrapped tight in a white bandage that the paramedics had put on the night before. 2 of them were cracked. Not broken all the way through, but cracked enough that every deep breath reminded him they were there. His right shoulder was bruised dark purple where it had slammed into the door. There was a cut above his left eyebrow held together by 2 small strips of medical tape. He looked like he had lost a fight. He felt like it too. He lay on top of his bed with his boots still on, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere outside, a woodpecker was working on a dead tree. A truck rumbled past on the street below. Normal sounds from a normal morning in Cedar Falls. But nothing about this morning felt normal to Ethan. His phone had been buzzing since 7. Lily had called 3 times. Sheriff Reeves had left 2 voicemails. He had listened to both of them while staring at the wall. The news wasn't good. The key witness was still missing. 2 pieces of physical evidence had been pulled from the county system overnight under a filing error that nobody could explain. Reeves sounded tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. The investigation was falling apart. Everyone could feel it. Ethan pressed the back of his hand against his eyes and let out a slow breath through his nose. He had told himself last night that he was going to keep going, that he wasn't going to let Mercer scare him off. But that was last night, when the adrenaline was still humming through him, and Rex was standing in his driveway with that steady, quiet presence that made everything feel survivable. In the morning light, with cracked ribs and a busted shoulder and a cracked back window on his truck, things felt different. What could he actually do? He wasn't a detective. He wasn't a lawyer. He was a dockhand who had seen something near a floodgate during a rainstorm. And now people with money and reach and hired men were making sure that didn't matter. He was still thinking through that when he heard the knock at the front door. It wasn't a quick knock. It was 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Even the knock sounded like Rex. Ethan pulled himself off the bed with a grunt, crossed the small hallway and opened the door. Rex stood on the porch in a plain gray shirt and dark jeans. No vest, no jacket. He looked like just a man. A big man, sure. A man with a face that had seen a lot of years and a lot of hard things, but just a man standing at a door. He looked at Ethan for a moment, taking in the taped eyebrow and the careful way Ethan was holding his right side. "You eat anything this morning?" Rex asked. Ethan shook his head. Rex nodded once. "Go sit down." He walked past Ethan into the kitchen like he had been there 100 times. Ethan heard him opening cabinets, the clink of a pan, the low click of the gas burner catching. Ethan lowered himself into a kitchen chair and didn't say anything. For a few minutes there was just the sound of Rex moving around the kitchen, eggs cracking, the soft sound of butter melting in the pan. The smell of it drifted across the room, and Ethan realized he actually was hungry. Rex set a plate down in front of him and pulled out the chair across the table. He sat down heavily, folded his big hands on the table, and looked at Ethan straight on. "Talk to me," Rex said. "Tell me where you're at." Ethan looked down at the plate, then back up. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," he said quietly. "I keep thinking about what I'm supposed to do next, and I just—" He stopped. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do next." Rex didn't say anything right away. He let the words sit there. He wasn't in a hurry. "You scared?" Rex asked. "Yeah," Ethan said. No hesitation. Rex nodded slowly. "Good." Ethan looked at him. "Fear means you're paying attention," Rex said. "A man who's not scared in a situation like this isn't brave. He's just not thinking clearly." He leaned forward slightly. "Fear is fine, Ethan. What matters is what you do with it." Ethan turned his fork over in his hand. "And if I decide I've already done enough? That I nearly drowned pulling Lily out of that river, and I nearly got myself killed last night, and maybe that's already more than most people do?" Rex was quiet for a moment. He looked out the small kitchen window at the oak tree in the backyard. His jaw moved slightly, like he was working through something before he said it. "After my crash," Rex said slowly, "I was in a bad way for a long time. Not just physically. I mean, something broke inside me that the doctors couldn't see on any scan." He paused. "I wanted to quit everything. Quit riding. Quit the club. Quit showing up for people. I figured I had used up whatever luck I had, and I should just get small and stay that way." Ethan listened. "One woman stopped on a highway in the middle of nowhere and sat with me in the dirt until help came." Rex looked back at Ethan. "She didn't have to stop. Plenty of people didn't. She had no reason to get involved. But she did it anyway, and she didn't do it because she wasn't scared." His voice got quieter. "She did it because she decided that being scared wasn't a good enough reason to drive past someone who needed help." The kitchen was very still. That woman raised you, Rex said. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest, not from the ribs, from somewhere deeper. Mercer is counting on you quitting, Rex said. That's his whole plan right now. Make it painful enough that good people step back, because if good people step back, he wins. He looked at Ethan steadily. You already know what the right thing to do is. You've always known. You just need to decide if you're going to do it scared. Ethan stared at the table for a long moment. Then he picked up his fork and started eating. After a minute, he looked up at Rex. Okay, he said. Rex leaned back in his chair. Something in his expression relaxed. Just slightly. Okay, Rex repeated. The morning came in gray and quiet. Ethan was up before sunrise. He made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with both hands wrapped around the mug. His ribs still ached when he breathed too deep. The cut above his eyebrow had started to itch, which his mother always said meant it was healing. He tried to hold on to that thought. By 7 o'clock, his phone rang. It was Rex. Can you meet me? Rex said. No greeting, no small talk. His voice had that flat, careful tone that Ethan had learned to pay attention to. When? Ethan asked. Now. Rex was already parked outside when Ethan pulled up to the old boat storage yard on the south edge of town. It was a wide gravel lot bordered by a chain-link fence and a row of overgrown cedar trees. Nobody came out here much in the off-season. That was probably why Rex had chosen it. Rex was leaning against his motorcycle with his arms crossed. 2 men Ethan recognized from the charity event stood nearby, quiet and watchful. Rex nodded at them, and they drifted back toward the fence to give the 2 men space. Talk to me, Ethan said, climbing out of his truck carefully. Rex reached into the inside pocket of his vest and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He held it out. Ethan took it and unfolded it. It was a printed page with handwritten notes in the margins. He recognized a county records number printed at the top. One of my guys has a contact who works county maintenance, Rex said. Word got back to me late last night. Mercer's people have been making calls, asking about a storage unit outside Cedar Falls, unit registered to a retired county contractor. He tapped the paper. That contractor is the same man who had access to the floodgate system before the storm. Ethan looked up. He's going after the evidence. What's left of it? Rex's jaw tightened. Mercer knows the investigation is still breathing. He's not going to wait around and hope it dies on its own. He's going to put it down himself. He nodded at the paper. My guess is he moves on that storage unit within the next 24 hours. Maybe sooner. Ethan folded the paper carefully. His mind was already moving. Does Reeves know? Not yet. I wanted to come to you first. Ethan looked at him. Rex didn't say anything else, but the meaning was clear. He had come to Ethan first because this was Ethan's call to make, not his. Ethan pulled out his phone and called Lily. She picked up on the second ring. Hey, you okay? I need you to come somewhere, Ethan said. Bring your car and meet me at the South Boatyard. And call Reeves. A short pause. What happened? Rex found something. Just come. Please. On my way, she said. Lily arrived 20 minutes later with Sheriff Reeves right behind her. The old sheriff stepped out of his cruiser and pulled his jacket closed against the morning chill. He looked at Rex without any of the usual wariness people showed around him. After everything the last several weeks had brought, wariness felt like a waste of energy. Tell me, Reeves said simply. Rex walked him through everything. The contact, the calls Mercer's people had been making, the storage unit, the contractor connection. He spoke clearly and without any extras, just the facts laid out in order. Reeves listened without interrupting. When Rex finished, The sheriff looked down at the gravel for a moment. Then he looked up at the small group standing in front of him. Ethan, Lily, Rex, a dockhand, a young woman, a Hell's Angel. Not the team anyone would have drawn up on paper, but the team Cedar Falls had. "All right," Reeves said, pulling out a small notebook from his shirt pocket. "Here is what we are going to do." He clicked his pen, and the four of them leaned in close and began to make a plan. The world was still dark when they moved. Ethan drove with his headlights off for the last half-mile, following the dirt road by memory more than sight. The trees on either side were thick and black against the deep blue sky. No stars, just cloud cover and the faint smell of river water carried on the wind. Rex rode ahead on his motorcycle, engine throttled low, barely a rumble. Two of his most trusted men flanked him on either side. They moved like shadows through the dark. Lily sat in the passenger seat of Ethan's truck. She hadn't said much since they left. She kept her eyes on the road ahead, and her hands folded in her lap. Ethan reached over once and touched her hand. She turned it over and held his without a word. Sheriff Reeves followed behind in an unmarked vehicle. He had 2 deputies riding with him. They had gone over everything twice the night before. Nobody was going in blind. The abandoned floodgate came into view first as a shape against the sky, a hulking structure of old concrete and rusted iron sitting at the edge of the river where it narrowed between 2 limestone ridges. It had been out of service for years. Weeds grew through the cracked walkway along its top. The river below it moved slow and dark. But there were lights down there, handheld flashlights cutting back and forth near the base of the structure. A van parked on the service road with its back doors open. 2 men carrying a metal box toward the water's edge. Ethan cut the engine and let the truck roll to a stop behind a stand of trees. He looked at Lily. "Stay here," he said quietly. She looked like she wanted to argue. But she nodded. Ethan climbed out slowly, keeping to low. Rex was already off his motorcycle and moving through the tree line on foot without making a sound. For a big man, he moved with an ease that still surprised Ethan every time. Reeves came up beside Ethan and crouched behind a fallen log. He spoke into his radio in a whisper. "Hold positions. Wait for my signal." Down at the floodgate, one of the men set the metal box down and pulled out a crowbar. He jammed it against the side of a lockbox mounted to the concrete base. The sound of metal scraping against metal rang out sharp and clear in the quiet morning air. Then a voice cut through the dark. "Get it open faster." Low and controlled, but impatient. Grant Mercer stepped into the beam of one of the flashlights. He was wearing dark clothes and work boots, nothing like the pressed suits he wore at town meetings. He looked smaller somehow, tighter, like a man trying to hold himself together through willpower alone. Reeves touched Ethan's arm. "Now," he said. He stood up, and his voice carried like a crack of thunder across the open ground. "Grant Mercer, Cedar Falls Sheriff's Department. Do not move." Everything happened fast. Mercer spun toward the sound. His men dropped the box and bolted in 2 different directions. One headed for the van, the other ran toward the riverbank. Rex was already moving. The man running for the van made it about 10 steps before Rex stepped out of the tree line directly in his path. The man skidded to a stop and stumbled backward. Rex grabbed him by the arm and held him there like he weighed nothing at all. The second man made it to the riverbank and stopped at the edge, looking down at the dark water below. One of Reeves' deputies closed in from the left, and the man raised both hands without another second of hesitation. Mercer tried to run. He turned and took 3 quick steps toward the darkness beyond the floodgate. And then he stopped cold. Ethan was standing right in front of him. They looked at each other for a long moment. Mercer's chest was heaving, his eyes were wide and darting. Behind Ethan, Sheriff Reeves stepped forward and placed a steady hand on Mercer's arm. "It's over, Grant," Reeves said calmly. He clicked the handcuffs into place. The sun came up slow over Cedar Falls. It climbed above the tree line in long bands of gold and pink, spilling light across the river until the water looked almost warm. The old floodgate cast a long shadow behind it. But the shadow was shrinking. Mercer stood beside a sheriff's cruiser with his hands cuffed behind his back and his eyes on the ground. He didn't speak. He didn't argue. He just stood there while Reeves spoke quietly into his radio, and the deputies moved through the area with evidence bags and cameras. The metal box was opened on the hood of the van. Inside were documents, hard copies, contracts between Mercer and 2 construction companies, signed and dated weeks before the storm, detailed notes about the floodgate structure, a handwritten list of property addresses along the Cedar Falls waterfront, each one marked with an estimated purchase price. Reeves picked up one of the pages and read it carefully. Then he set it down and looked at Mercer for a long moment. "You were going to buy this whole town," Reeves said, "after you scared everyone enough to sell." Mercer said nothing. Reeves turned away. Ethan stood near the edge of the water and watched the river move. It caught the early morning light and threw it back in small, bright pieces. He thought about that day weeks ago when the same water had tried to swallow him whole. How loud it had been. How cold and relentless and completely without mercy. It looked peaceful now. Rex walked over and stood beside him. Neither of them spoke for a minute. Rex had a cut above his left eyebrow from the scuffle. He hadn't mentioned it, and he didn't seem bothered by it. He just stood there watching the river with his arms crossed and his expression quiet. "It's done," Ethan said. Rex gave a slow nod. "It's done." Lily came across the grass from Reeves' vehicle where she had been waiting. She walked straight to Ethan and he put his arm around her, and she leaned into him without a word. The 3 of them stood there together in the growing light while the deputies worked behind them. Weeks passed. The story came out the way truth usually does. Slowly at first. Then, all at once, Mercer was charged with criminal sabotage, destruction of public infrastructure, witness tampering, and conspiracy. His lawyers arrived in expensive cars. But the evidence in that metal box was not the kind that could be argued away. The contracts were real. The notes were in his own handwriting. 2 of his hired men took deals and confirmed everything. The floodgate was repaired by a crew that volunteered most of their labor for free. Cedar Falls residents brought food to the work site every day. Someone painted a small mural on the side of the control building. It showed the river under a clear sky, with the words painted in simple blue letters along the bottom. "This town holds." The waterfront came back to life. Businesses reopened. Families that had been thinking about leaving decided to stay. The fear that Mercer had worked so hard to plant in the community never fully took root. People were more stubborn than he had counted on. On the evening of the town's official recovery celebration, the park along the lake was filled with people. String lights hung between the trees. Someone had set up a barbecue. Children ran along the restored dock while their parents sat on blankets and watched the water. Ethan and Lily sat together on a bench near the water's edge, close enough that their shoulders touched. Lily had her head tilted back, looking up at the last of the color in the sky. Ethan watched her and felt something settle deep inside his chest, something that had been unsettled for a long time. Rex stood apart from the crowd near the tree line. He watched the celebration with his hands in his jacket pockets, and a stillness about him that was different from his usual watchfulness. He wasn't guarding anything. He wasn't scanning for threats. He was just at peace. Ethan got up from the bench and walked over to him. "Thank you," Ethan said, "for everything." Rex looked at him. Then he looked out at the thriving town around them. The lights, the laughter, the river catching the last of the sunset and carrying it gently downstream. "Your mother saved me," Rex said. His voice was low and steady. "You saved all of this." The river moved on below them, calm and unhurried, catching the last gold light of the day and holding it just long enough before letting it go. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.